Hello, and welcome to an all new episode of the Transfix Take podcast, where each week we deliver news, insights, and trends for shippers and carriers. It's the week of March 6th. I'm Jenny Ruiz, and I'm joined by our market expert, Justin Mays. Mays, how's it going?
It's going great, Jenny. Glad to be back here with you again this week to talk more about freight.
Oh, yeah, and there's a lot that's happening. I think, of course, we have to start off with an update on what we hope to be the last stretch of winter weather. Now, over the weekend, I-80 along Donner Pass in California was shut down due to a whopping 6 to 8+ feet of snow in some areas for 72 hours with no ETA of reopening. Hundreds of trucks were stranded. Now, luckily, since then, the snow has been cleared and conditions have improved, but obviously there were significant delays here. So, Mays, how do you think this is going to impact the freight market for the week ahead?
Well, Jenny, it is really unfortunate for all those drivers stuck out in the weather.
Yeah.
But overall, for the freight market, it's not going to be super impactful to the West Coast.
Okay.
Now, there are small pockets, especially to where you alluded to, that are going to continue to be impacted. I would say that we are past any impact. When I say impact, I don't necessarily mean about the freight markets, about pricing and capacity, but more so the delays.
Okay.
But outside of that, I think we are past the weather issues really out in the West Coast, other than those pockets around the Sierra Nevada mountains. And it's unfortunate for the drivers out there, but for those skiers and snowboarders getting some snow one last time this season, I'm sure they're happy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that one kind of came out of nowhere. So I guess I want to say we're in the clear. We say that every week, so we never know. But let's hope at least for the next month we'll be good. We'll find out. But that said, you know what it's time for? It's the regional breakdown. Now, for the past few weeks, we've been keeping a close eye on the national average rate per mile, as we usually do, and whether we might see a jump. But Mays, what's the latest on rates at a national level, and are there any big call-outs for tender rejections?
So, Jenny, I would say at a national level, we've kind of hit a flat line now for almost a week. We've been sitting at $1.58 since mid last week. Rejections have continued to fall downward. We came into the month of February above 5% nationally, and today we walk into right around 3.7% rejection rates for the dry van.
Okay.
I would say one thing that we really need to keep an eye on is volume. We're going to be talking a lot about seasonality today and in future episodes, but will March bring that seasonal upward lift in volume? We have been seeing it in the past week, but it really will set the nature around the demand in the market and what we could expect potentially in the spot market. But as of right now, we're continuing to see kind of the national rate per mile sit flat. But again, regionally, we are seeing different stories.
And as you noted, since we started with the West Coast at the top of the show, let's kick it off in this region. Now, over a 60-day delta, we've seen rates take a nosedive near 9%, with just about every single market averaging a 2% decrease over the last 7 days. What can we expect out of this region?
That's right, Jenny. The West Coast just has not been favorable for drivers, not just this past weekend, but since the beginning of 2024.
Yeah.
But on the bright side, we are starting to see the downward falling market slow down on the West Coast. Now we're still seeing downward pressure in most markets, but the higher volume markets in Southern California, Phoenix, Arizona, even Vegas, we're starting to see some pressure. I think we still have some room to move downward over the next 2 weeks, pending any other major snowstorms. But this region particularly is going to start really flatlining and even seeing an upward tick in rates through the month of March, especially in the southern part of the West region.
Okay. Now, produce season is finally underway in the South, with border markets seeing an uptick in freight, like my personal favorite, avocados. What should we expect in the next few days here?
So the South region is going to continue to be the region to keep an eye on for carriers that are looking for higher paying freight leaving.
Okay.
Now, it's going to become a cheaper region to send trucks into. But as you mentioned, we are in the beginning of produce season, still pretty early, but March usually kicks off produce season for the state of Texas. We're going to continue to see demand rise, capacity tighten, rates go upward. This is the first time that we can really say an entire region has moved upward over the last week. Usually we're talking about a market or two, but the entire southern region is starting to see that pressure, and this is going to continue to build up over the next few weeks, although it's not going to be sudden, it's going to be slow.
Good to know. Now we're starting to get into the nosedive section of the regions. The Midwest continues to see rates decrease with a 60-day delta of a nearly 5% drop. Do we anticipate any movement here this week, or is it going to be the same story?
It's going to be the same story, but with a slimmer decline. We are going to start seeing the Midwest and other regions likewise slow their decline downward. There's just not as much room for rates to move. It is normal for the seasonal change in the Midwest and even the Northeast to start seeing these rates fall like we have been. But we are going to hit that plateau, I would say, within the next 30 days. Shippers need to continue to take advantage of this right now, and carriers need to make sure that they're at least setting themselves in a better paying market.
Yeah, especially for some of the spiral that we saw with revocations in January. There's still time to keep up, hopefully, for a lot of the smaller mid-sized carriers. Now, rainy weather is on the forecast for just about the entire week in the Northeast markets. As we record this, there's tons of rain behind me, and it looks like the most interesting market that's seeing some tightening here is Hartford, Connecticut. But where does the Northeast stand when it comes to what we could potentially see this week?
So you are right. Hartford, Connecticut is seeing the most tightening. But it's not just Hartford. We're also seeing a slowing of the decline in the larger volume markets like Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Allentown, Pennsylvania, Elizabeth, New Jersey. Now, this kind of attracts my eye to show that the entire region is starting to really slow down much more than what we're seeing in the Midwest. This could be, weather related. At the end of the day, I do think that the Northeast will actually experience the largest drop through the month of March, but we are not seeing that poke its head through just yet. I would say over the next week, we're going to continue to see the same trend we saw in the past week, where we lose maybe 1% in the average rate leaving the Northeast. Yeah. But again, I go back to what I said in the Midwest. Carriers need to make sure that they're setting their trucks into better paying markets, because you're just not going to get the same amount of money out of the Northeast and Midwest as you have been over the past few months.
Yeah. Now, maybe this is the trifecta here. After a tight February, the Southeast continues to cool down. We're seeing some rate increases for long hauls out of this area, but produce season in this region really doesn't begin until next month, with oranges being the most popular from the region. Are there any markets we should be keeping a close eye on?
I would say we always got to keep an eye on the Miami market. It's really a signaling market for the state of Florida, going upward to Lakeland and Jacksonville. I think the Southeast, since it was able to maintain a tighter capacity through the most part of February, we have a lot of room to still move down, even before we head into produce season. It's really going to be up to the carriers to see if they can hold the pressure on rates that we saw, but it looks like they're starting to lose their grip on rates as rates continue to move downward. But on the bright side, if you do look at like the Atlanta market up in Georgia, which is the highest volume market in the Southeast, we're starting to see some signs of, the slowing down of the downward market, and that could potentially spread into the state of Florida. But it's going to be tough to tell where we end up in the Southeast going into the end of the month. Just how early will produce season start is going to be a big signal to the rest of the markets that are neighboring the Southeast.
Yeah, we could see a start as early as the end of March, but it's usually, I think, if I remember correctly, like mid-April to even late April when it starts, bearing everything goes right with global warming and so forth. Last but not least, the coastal region ends this sort of downward trajectory of regions on the decline. But given the neighboring markets like Tennessee and its recent deep freeze, will this region pick up this week?
So I don't think it's going to pick up. It's been a stubborn region, although whatever I anticipate the coastal region to do, it just doesn't do. We are seeing pressure actually show in Charlotte, North Carolina, Roanoke, Virginia. So we are seeing some upward pressure. So you may want to bet against me and go with what you're saying. See some upward pressure over the next week. But I am going to bet that we see rates continue to fall and capacity loosen in the coastal region, just because we haven't really seen it to the extent we've seen in every neighboring region. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see what the outcome is, especially in the local freight, where carriers have really been able to demand and keep their rates up.
Yeah, I don't know if I would ever take a bet against you, Maze. I think I'm going to go with you on this one, but I think it's time to bust out the crystal ball since we're just getting started with a brand new month. Now, we're obviously in the last month of Q1, and Q2 could be a bit of a shakeup. So, Maze, what are your big bets for March? I feel like we got a regionally a little bit of an insight there, but what are you thinking?
So I think at a national level, we're going to see the average rate per mile line haul drop about 3% still. Now it's a much slower drop than what we experienced the month of February,
Yeah.
but we're definitely seeing capacity still extremely loose. The demand is starting to pick up, but will it hold through the month of March? Is going to be something I really watch closely. Is something that we haven't really called out recently, but volume levels, because we are higher. Starting the month of March, we are higher this year than we were last year. If that can hold, we may see additional pressure. But then we go to tender rejections. Tender rejections, I do think, are going to continue to fall, especially as new contracts go into place. I think we're going to see them drop down to 3.25%, somewhere around that, by the end of the month. But another thing to keep an eye on is fuel. Fuel has been somewhat volatile. We've seen the last 2 weeks fuel drop.
Yep.
It does have an impact on not just shippers, but carriers. And I think it's no guess that the South region is going to continue to be the tightest region, with the Midwest and Northeast seeing the greatest reduction in average rate over the next month.
Yeah. Quick question on the West Coast. Do you think it's going to continue to take the reins on the least desirable market through March, or do you feel like there will be a bit of a swing there at all?
I think we're going to start seeing the West Coast poke its head up as a more desirable region. Now, it's going to be very specific parts of the West Coast, though, like the border states, Arizona, parts of California, even Southern California. We're starting to see tender rejections rise in the Ontario and Los Angeles market. So it's starting to show some signs that may interest some carriers there. But if too much capacity goes there, it kind of erases the whole impact of higher volumes. But it's something to keep an eye on. Like I said, volumes nationally, but volumes also by high desirable freight markets.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a lot to keep an eye out on for March. It's going to be a very interesting month.
Definitely. Before we go, on behalf of the entire Transfix team, our hearts go out to all those who have been impacted by the wildfires in Texas. We hope that everyone is safe and that the fires get contained soon. And with that, we will see you guys on an all-new episode of the Transfix Take next week.
See you then.